All right, it's nice to have you on yet another thrilling episode of Enterprise Morning on Enterprise TV. I am Henry Igwibike. In a bit, we'll be going to our newspaper headlines to see what they have for us this morning. And after that will be, conversation for today. So while we get everything sorted out, please do well to visit our website at www.enterprisetvnews.com and also like, comment, and follow us on all our social media platforms at Enterprise TV 7. With me in the studios today to do justice to our newspaper reviews is Achike Chuda. He is a journalist and also public affairs analyst. Good morning to you, sir.
Yeah, good morning. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so very much for giving us your time. So before we get right into our newspaper headlines, I think it's very important, maybe we raise this, for the starters. Some couple of days, troops of Operation Safe Haven has uncovered an illegal weapon manufacturing factory in Pakashi community in Mango local government area of Plateau State. James Oyam, the media officer of the operation, said the troops also recovered various types of arms and ammunition and arrested one suspect during the operation. Now, this is coming at a time when Mango particularly have seen, frequent massacre, and it has come to a point where it's no longer having any control from those in authority. Why do you think this is coming out now?
Well, I don't know. There are some details that we might not be aware of.
Yeah.
Sometimes some of the information that fades out in the public space are information that have been managed one way or the other, so that a certain perspective is given to us.
Okay.
And that is the duty of, actually, it's part of the responsibility of journalists to go behind the scene, to also unearth information that a government that has an interest to protect will not want to bring out in the public space. But we'll work with what we have, really. Like you said, Mango has been in the eye of the storm for quite some time.
True.
A lot of the recent atrocities by bandits, kidnappers, and all manners of insurgents have happened in that local government, with the federal authorities being blamed for complacency, following in the midst of these tragedies. And so I think it is significant in a way that this weapon manufacturing factory has been discovered in that local government. Though, from the report I read, it's like it was discovered somewhere in a mountainous part of that particular community. Why the authorities do not have that information now, before now, is what I do not know. And again, you also want to ask yourself, is there any loyalty, for instance, by people within the people who are manufacturing these arms? Do they have any loyalty to any of the contesting, any of the warring factions, whether they're the Fulani headsmen or the local communities and all that? Or is it that they are soldiers of fortune? They are selling their arms to both sides. So we don't know. Is it an attempt again by the people within that community to also, since they cannot have access to arms to protect themselves, is it a way of also ensuring that within that community that they have what it takes to be able to provide enough equipment for them to protect
defend
their
themselves?
Own people? So these are some of the issues, because we know that the right to defense is an inalienable right. The right to self-defense is an inalienable right. And obviously that right has been denied them by the federal authorities. There has been this discussion about people, arming themselves so that they can better defend themselves, but the government obviously has refused. Under the administration of Muhammad Buhari at the time, there was an order issued that everybody that has illegal arms, or even arms that were procured legally, should submit them to the police authorities. And people saw this as a way of disempowering people in besieged communities. Because at the same time, people were asking a question. They said, look, but the Fulani headsmen also have their weapons, which they display openly. And the government has not taken it away from them. So that's why, because sometimes the more you look, especially in this country, the less you see. So I will look at it from different angles.
Yes, exactly.
First of all, it is illegal to have that kind of, factory. But what was the purpose? Was it, aiding the massacres that were going on in that community, or was it supposed to aid the defense of that community by the people of the community? So these are, so I just want to look at it from different perspectives. First of all, I acknowledge that it is unlawful, but I also acknowledge the right of the people to defend themselves, which the federal government has not been able to do. You don't defend the people, you don't have capacity to defend the people, and you don't do anything when the people are in crisis, and you are denying them the opportunity to defend themselves. They have to look for a way to defend themselves. And if it is by procuring, arms through this factory, though it is illegal, but if you ask me, if that is the sole purpose of doing that, then there could be some justification for that. But if the authorities were to adequately provide to protect the people, then there will be no basis for that kind of a factory.
Exactly, because I really love the perspective, by which you address this issue. Because someone going through the dailies and seeing this headline news would think it is coming from the Fulani herdsmen, but you just made it look like, it could be from them, but at the same time, it could be a defensive way of them protecting themselves, which of course is a balance.
That is the truth.
Yes,
that is absolutely the truth. Because look, it has gotten to a level where you are allowing the people to undergo some form of genocide, maybe on a much lower level genocide, and the hands of these marauders are come in the night and wipe out entire communities and so on, and send them away from their communities and take over those communities and change the name of those communities. And this is what we have been hearing. That's why sometime in the past, Wole Soyinka was talking about ethnic cleansing taking place in parts of a Plateau state.
Exactly. All right, so quickly, let's start off with our daily. Today, it's coming from the Guardian newspaper, and the banner headline says a forex crisis pushes petrol subsidy to 907.5 billion naira monthly. And we have on that particular story, Senate begins constitution review as reps canvass return to a parliamentary system in 2031. After school children epidemic, 68 billion naira UBEC fund. Electricity tariff to double as federal government considers hike over debt burden. Mr. Ajike, let's take a look at two very important issues here. Number one is on the issue of forest crisis, pushing petrol subsidy to 907.5 billion naira, and the issue of electricity. But let's start with the forex issue. I used to think that the subsidy is gone. Why are we having right now that we will still have 907.5 billion naira subsidy monthly? Where is this coming from?
Sometimes you lack words to describe what is going on in the country. And obviously the government is not telling us the truth. The president announced to the whole nation that subsidy is gone. But sometime later, the Independent Market Association told us that the federal government was still paying subsidy. The IMF also came out to say that the federal government was still paying subsidy. The government is saying, no, we are not paying subsidy. So the Tinubu administration on their own has set up a chain reaction of very negative, events within the Nigerian polity that have ensured the exacerbation of poverty and the frustration, in the life of the people. There is rampant hunger in the land, and this hunger is accompanied by great anger by the Nigerian people. The government had better do something, and do something rapidly. Because right now, even from the headline, you're also talking about the electricity companies doubling their tariff.
Yeah, exactly.
That is highly insensitive and dangerously provocative.
At a time like this.
At a time like this. The government is playing with fire. If nobody has told them this in very vivid terms, they are playing with fire. I mean, I am happy that I'm not privileged to be one of those in government who do not have an idea, perhaps do not have an idea about what is going on in the country, I move with the people. Whether it's Okada riders, whether it's to take a bus, whether it's to move around the city, whether it's to talk with artisans and the rest. And so you can see the frustration in the land. So and I think that the least the government can do is to come out and tell us the truth. And Dangote has started the refinery. And for some of us who were hopeful about what was going to happen, that better things will come, there'll be less pressure on foreign exchange, because a lot of these things will be produced, refined locally. Same thing with the Port Harcourt refinery, they say it has come on stream and all that. But Dangote dashed the hopes of Nigerians by saying that they're not having enough crude oil supplies and that they have to rely on importation from the United States of America for crude oil. So expectations gone down the window. Port Harcourt refinery, we're hearing stories every day. So what it means is that nothing significant will be done to the exchange rate, and it will still be the same old situation. So how are we paying a whopping 9-point-something billion naira
monthly
on a monthly basis? 9-point-something billion naira. I mean, 900-something billion.
907.5 billion naira monthly.
I mean, so we are talking about if care is not taken, you're talking about going to 1 trillion naira.
Exactly.
Monthly. That's the implication.
Yes.
So how come? What is happening? What exactly is going on? What's the Tinubu administration?
In spite of the fact that the current fuel price is 617 naira.
Thank you. And we are also told that states are now awash with money because there's so much money going to the states as a result of the savings from subsidy. So what it means is that they're also telling Nigerians that hey, you'll be buying fuel for 1,200 naira per liter. And so what it means is that, everybody in this office, for instance, and in most offices in this country, try and wake up around 3 o'clock so that from 4 o'clock you start trekking to your office. 4 hours of trekking, because people cannot afford it. As it is now, it is so difficult for people to move around. And even those that are moving around on an empty stomach. They are not feeding well. Even for those who are feeding, go and check the quality of food that they are eating. It's lacking in most of the essential nutrients, and vitamins that are needed to keep the body alive. So people are just barely, doing things that they should be doing on a daily basis. So this is bad news. The Tinubu, and again, I think what they are trying to do, I think people have always made the argument that there's a time for propaganda. There's a time for you to get down to the brass tacks and do your work. But I think the problem we have seen with the APC government is a government of propaganda from the very beginning. And propaganda has worked for them, actually. Propaganda helped in removing the PDP government of Jonathan Goodluck. And then they continue with the propaganda, even when Goodluck had left. Propaganda has also helped again. Fine, all sides play propaganda.
But you understand that there's always a shelf life to every propaganda. Do you think it will come to a time when the Tinubu administration would get to that point where
it's not as if do I think whether it will get to a time. It has gotten to that time, unfortunately, so early in this administration. For the Buhari administration, it took about 4 years for the eyes of Nigerians to clear, for those who wanted to be discerning and who were objective about this country. After the first 4 years, it was clear that there was no vision, there was no commitment to the Nigerian state. And so somehow they were able to get another 4 years. And after 8 years, people sat down and said, look, this is the worst government we have seen in the history of this country. But Tinubu is not having the same honeymoon. It's just about 9 months, 10 months down the line, and people are already fed up. People are now beginning to ask questions about how he got to power. And you see, this is what we tell politicians, that it is risky when you get to power all the time, maybe through controversial means, because you need to get to power with the people believing that you got there on the strength of your campaign, on the strength of the votes of the people. Because troubled times will come. The winds are going to blow fierce. The storm is going to come. When all these things come, you need that perception from the people that we voted for you to try to carry you through. But once you came in through controversial circumstances, when you run into troubled waters, people are going to say, But don't you remember how he came to power? So that support that is needed from the people, that anchor from the confidence that the people know that they voted for you, will not be there. And you are going to be abandoned quickly. So you realize that it is better. That's why, when you go into the election, when we are talking about the election, there's no international agency, observer agency that will tell you, look, elections must be free, fair, and credible. They don't say that. I'm an election observer. It is said the usual, statement with regards to that is that it must be perceived to be free, fair, and credible. It must be perceived. The perception of the people is important. And so when an election is perceived to have gone the other way, when you as a government get into trouble, that support you need from the people, you will not get it because they will question your legitimacy.
True. Very, very true. All right, so let's move on to our next daily, and this is coming from the Daily Trust newspaper. I have the banner headline, Hardship, Nigeria sitting on keg of gunpowder, and that's coming from the Sultan. And we have the rider there says, we will distribute 42,000 tons of grains for free. This coming from the federal government telling Nigerians. And also the sub-rider there says, no crashing food prices is better, and that's coming from experts. Can NBA demand concrete action? Zuluma Biodun Sanwo-Olu unveil a measure. And right below that particular story, we have military bossed gun factory in Plateau State, just like we had during our starters and our introduction for today. And on the top strip of the same newspaper, we have 60 reps a proposed bill to return Nigeria to a parliamentary system. Upstream Commission transfers over 200 staff to Lagos. Amid economic hardship, Trust Radio brings joy to lovers. Mr. Achik, of course, this is coming from the last discussion we had. Just like you did say exactly, Nigeria is sitting on a keg of gunpowder, and that's coming from Sultan. And the question I'd love to ask is, despite the controversial, ways, those in authority, of course, we all saw it that day on, 25th of February 2023. We all saw what happened. Now, despite the controversial way the current administration came into power, don't you think it's still possible to have a smooth transition, right, from a Buhari administration that already people were tired to an administration where it was better? Don't you think there could be this character change in the person in power? Isn't that possible?
No.
Let's go back to history and see leaders who have gone through that route and succeeded.
There's a saying that every succeeding government in Nigeria is worse than the preceding government. So, and if you look at it, let's look at the Abacha administration. Abacha, the dictator, and all the struggle to remove Abacha and all that. Eventually, he died, and there was a sigh of relief. People celebrated his death, and then Obasanjo came in. And after Obasanjo, even during Obasanjo's administration, people were saying, "But Abacha was better than Obasanjo." Then we had Yaradua. We didn't have enough time because he died, and we did see the real Yaradua. I feel he was a very good man. Then Jonathan came in, and there was that issue again about Obasanjo Jonathan. People say, but the Obasanjo government was better than the Jonathan government. And then Buhari came in, and they said this is the worst government in the history of this country, that they should have left us with the PDP and Jonathan, that things were far better under Jonathan, and they would tell you about the GDP growth rate. There was 7% GDP growth. So many other things, prices of commodities and the rest. You couldn't, even the debt profile got worse under Buhari. Now, but just 10 months into this administration, people are already beginning to say, as bad as Buhari's government was, there were things that were working. And people were saying, look, for some of us who believe that Buhari's government is the worst in the history of this country, that Tinubu must not act in a way that will begin to make Buhari feel like a saint. And believe me, that's exactly what we're seeing. The situation in Nigeria is unprecedented.
True.
We never saw this level of instability and hunger even under the Buhari administration. And that is what is frightening, because this is just 10 months down the line.
We still have
How are they
3
going
years
to,
plus.
Yes, how are they going to contain it? If they had a clear path to transforming this country and making things better, you would say yes. But whether it is from the exchange rate, is the insecurity in the country and the rest, you cannot see any discernible path, positive path that the government is going that will tell you, look, they are moving in the right direction. So they don't even know what they are doing. They are confused. They lack the competence, they lack the ability, they lack the commitment to be able to turn things around. And that's why I say that we are living in very dangerous times. The Sultan has just said it. Of course, you know why he would say so. This is a time where people will begin to behave like Pilate. Wash their hands. Wash their hands just in case anything happens.
Even if they were contributors prior.
Yes, I mean, one of them is Kwan Sikira barrister. He has always been an ardent follower of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. In most of his movements, he was there and all that, And so he released a new album also, trying to tell the president that people are hungry. Why did he do that? Because there are people that are looking at him and saying, but
you were the one that encouraged us.
Also part of it. You moved us along. So he's doing it also to protect himself.
Asari too.
I have started talking. Okay, Asari too. They have, you understand? So because if we have, hopefully it doesn't happen. If we have a revolutionary situation in this country, or some of the people that the Nigerians will look out for are those people who are visibly part of this process. So some of them are trying to wash their hands off what is going on, and it's a terrible situation. It's terrible times, But the president, for instance, yes, they are trying to do something. 42,000 grains. From the grain reserves and so on.
For free.
For free. How many people do you think?
Exactly.
How many people? 500,000. If you break it down to kg, 42,000, kg times 1,000, what would that give you? Then break it down with the population of Nigeria, by the population of Nigeria. And you realize that it might just cater for 1 day.
Exactly.
Or 2 days for Nigerians. So there's nothing there. But when they announce it, they think that Nigerians will be less discerning. They won't break it down to know how many people will benefit from that process. And then when they do that, they do not have the capacity to replace it. And don't forget that for these grains they are releasing, it's not for a moment such as this. It's for emergency situation.
Wow. Yeah, exactly.
And all that. And so that means that the application of this grain reserve, in terms of who you give it to, will be limited to the place where a crisis has taken place.
True.
You understand? But now we are talking about the entire nation. It's the entire nation of Nigerians that are hungry.
Grieving. True. Now, talking about this postulate that you have, do you think going forward, it's possible for us to keep having the same series of events where every leader who comes in could be worse than the last one that was there?
Because nothing has been done by the political elites to transform the system and to change the system. And that's why when you think about what these 60 lawmakers have said, I think you read it.
Yes, exactly.
That is one fundamental way of beginning to ask questions about our country and what is happening. Obviously, we cannot continue along this path. And so if they are saying, let us move away from the presidential system to a parliamentary system, it's an indication, the presupposition is that the system you are moving away from has failed. Therefore, we must move on to something new.
Especially coming from mostly northern legislatures.
Exactly, and that is the thing, across different political parties. But so want to see what the executives are going to do, what they are going to say. Because don't also forget that there is the issue of personal interest. It's not the interest of the Nigerian nation. The Nigerian nation is not of interest to the political elites. It's about their own personal interest in the context of the Nigerian nation. So are they going to say, okay, let's all work towards it, so that in the next 4 years, you understand, we'll be able to transition into a parliamentary system of government. If that happens, what happens to the president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu? So if, for instance, he has an eye on another 4 years, and there's nothing to indicate that he does not, the tendency is that he will work against it. The tendency is that the governors will work against it, because it is not about Nigeria. If it were about Nigeria, they will subsume their personal interest and impose national interest, over their personal interest. But they are going to work against it. Exactly. And then the next thing they will tell you is that we just do it for 8 years. After 8 years, then we can now transition to a new system. But there are people who are saying you didn't do it within your time when you were there after the first 4 years. So why do you now want to affect us?
Oh,
yeah, so this
very
is
true.
Yes.
Yeah, very true. All right, so lastly, let's go to last daily for today. It's coming from the Punch newspaper, and the banner headline says the Tinubu government meets over food crisis as Emir NBA lament hardship, and we'll have the rider there, President governors meeting to provide solutions. So monarchs, NBA lament economic crunch and security, and the sub rider there says federal government distributes free 42,000 metric tons of grains. Okun government rolls out over 5 billion naira intervention plans. Still going on the palliative route that the government is saying, which of course is not sustainable. Now on the top strip of the same newspaper, federal government to borrow over 2 trillion naira via bonds. And also we have the sad news that raked our nation, especially the banking sector, flying Wigwe orders in bad weather wrong. That's coming from a U.S. aviation lawyer. Actually, let's talk about a bit on the federal government to borrow over 2 trillion via bonds. What does this mean? If you can break it down for us, for our viewers who might not get to understand what that means exactly.
Well, the government is in dire straits. They're looking for money left, right, and center. They've been borrowing money from the international financial organizations, IMF, World Bank, and all that. And they have also printed, from what I was told, about 7 trillion or so through ways and means. That is the CBN. And that is absolutely unsustainable because part of the problem of the devaluation of the naira also, and the crisis within the economy is as a result of borrowing that is not backed up by any productive activity. And don't forget that some years ago, Obaseki, the governor of Edo State, kept on talking about it, that we're going to pay a price for that. So they are borrowing money again, but this time around, government bonds, would usually government bonds, it's something that people can invest in. It's an investment into government bonds, which has, a particular yield, interest yield, that usually it's long term. Usually, sometimes it can be short term, but usually it's long term. So when you invest, it's like when you invest in the stock exchange. When you invest in that, the government collects the money, and then years down the line, you're able to recoup from that. You're able to, I'm not an economist, but that's essentially what it's all about. So this is what bonds are all about. But it's the government borrowing money, from the public space, and then you, as an individual, will invest in it. And then in years to come, government has an obligation to pay, and then you make your money. It's like when you invest in the stock exchange too. You buy stocks and the rest, it is there. And then when you want to sell, you sell, and then you make your money. So that's what government is trying to do, instead of going through the normal route of ways and means and maybe borrowing from. Of course, those who are borrowing money to Nigeria, I think, are also tired because they have seen what Nigeria does with the money that she borrows.
All right.
Yeah.
So lastly, let's talk about this, the sad event, of course, that raked our financial sector, the debt of Herbert Wigwe. And right now the U.S. aviation lawyer is saying that it's even wrong in the first place to fly passengers during bad weather. And the question is, who do you think we should blame in this particular incident that happened? Is it a blame on the choice that we have as individuals? Because, of course, what took Herbert Wigwe and the family they were going for recreation to watch the Super Bowl, okay? And the helicopter took off at night, and the weather was bad. Now, is it an issue of choice, or is it an issue of coincidence? And how can we as individuals try to cheat death if it's possible?
I don't know whether it was too much faith in the system in America, that their planes and their helicopters are much safer, that their pilots are much more experienced. I don't know. Because the question I want to ask myself is, if it were in Nigeria, you had that kind of storm, that kind of rain, would he have wanted
exactly.
to fly to Abuja
Exactly.
or any other part of the country in that
Exactly.
situation? So there was this issue, this personal decision also, that this weather, nobody needs to tell you that the weather is bad.
Very
it is
true.
bad.
Very true.
You understand? Is it ideal for flying? It cannot be ideal for flying, because good weather is always better for flying than bad weather.
Exactly.
And that's why if you have, some place you enter and then you don't encounter any bumps, in the sky, it's just very, very smooth.
Yeah.
There are somewhere along the line, the pilot tells you brace for a little bit of bump here, but there's nothing to worry about.
Exactly.
So when in the midst of, a big, terrible weather, it becomes a problem. And I think if we remember Kobe Bryant and some people in the helicopter also crashed during very bad weather.
True.
And then we just had a few days ago an Air Force plane carrying some American Air Force crew also crashed in bad weather. And so people have been saying the same thing, that the planes should not have flown. Wigwe's helicopter should not have flown. But the question you ask yourself is, what was so urgent for the Wigwe family?
Exactly.
Because the decision to go anywhere was their decision.
Exactly.
You understand? And so even if they told you that the weather, yes, it's bad, but it's all right, why was he so confident? Would he have done that in Nigeria? So that's why I talked about putting perhaps greater faith in the system and the ability of that plane to have taken them safely to where they were going. So of course the investigation is still on. The NTSB is investigating. Perhaps they would also come out later to tell us whether there was a failure of the plane. Maybe there were issues with the helicopter, or whether it was pilot's negligence, or just generally that the weather contributed to the downing of to the crash. So these are the things we find. Unfortunately, finding out these things can only be useful for the living, for those who are going to come after.
It can't recall back.
And the crew and his friend, are all gone. They can't come back again.
Very true. So where do you think this leaves Access Bank, especially? Do you think they will have a greater strength?
If it's a well-structured bank, there's always a process for success. And so, as they say, unfortunately, we have to say, because that's the truth, that's the truth. Soldiers come, soldiers go. The barrack remains the same. And so once you have built, and that's the essence of building an institution. Once you have built an institution is not supposed to be dependent on one man. An institution outlives the people who make up that institution.
True.
And so when, something bad happens, because it's a normal thing that bad things happen, unforeseen, unexpected things happen. When they happen, do you have a process in place, a structure in place that ensures that crisis, that there is adequate preparation for that crisis to be dealt with, and that's what you call is it crisis management. It has happened, but there must be a way to ensure that it does not do so much harm to the system. Of course, the individual personality of certain people matters. There are people that have the personality, that have the
aura.
Thank you. I think that's the word, the aura. And you cannot replicate that. People would always be different. The person that comes in might be better, it might be worse. But the reality is that there can never be a Herbert Wigwe. Because Herbert Wigwe, as known by the world, that one is gone. It cannot be replaced. Not even the sun can replace it.
Exactly. Very, very true. Yes, so that's just about the time we have for our newspaper reviews today. I'd love to say my big thank you to Achike Chude for being part of our show today. It was indeed a very engaging discourse. Thank you so very much, sir.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.
For having me.
All right, so when we return, 60 reps sponsor bill to introduce a parliamentary system, target 2031 for implementation. That in a bit. When we come back, please don't go anywhere.
Enterprise TV, a tradition of truth.